I hadn't planned on driving this far. My gas tank was half empty, my wallet almost the same, and the road past midnight looked like a wound through the desert. Quiet, slow bleeding. 3 months since I'd lost the warehouse job. Rent overdue, credit card maxed, my sister's hospital bill sitting unread in my inbox. Every listing I'd applied to said filled. Then one afternoon, while scrolling Craigslist that felt more like punishment than hope, I saw it. Night shift attendant, $175 per night, 5 nights only. No background check, no degree, just must stay awake. I didn't think. I clicked apply. Now I was 30 minutes early, parked in front of a gas station that looked dead, but somehow still open. The sign just said gas, one red letter flickering. No brand, no slogan. The lot was lit by 2 weak lamps, one buzzing like a trapped fly. I sat in my Honda Civic, engine off, and smoked a Marlboro, trying not to think about how fast $175 could disappear. A Camry and an old pickup were already there. Inside, through the glass, I saw shelves stacked with M&Ms, beef jerky, and instant coffee packets. A familiar American kind of loneliness, the kind that sells sugar and caffeine so you can keep pretending you're fine. The dashboard clock blinked 11:27 p.m. I told myself, "You're early, Dean. First impressions matter." I stepped out. The air smelled of gasoline and dust. Somewhere out on the highway, a truck horn moaned, long and low, fading into the cold. When I reached the door, I caught my reflection. I looked tired, eyes hollow, hair messy, jacket wrinkled. But that was normal. Everyone looks tired these days. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, mid-50s maybe, neat beard, company vest, calm eyes. The kind of calm that comes from knowing too much. He smiled as I entered. "Dean Lewis?" "Yeah, you must be Mr. Garrison." "That's right," he said. His voice was steady but low, like someone trying not to wake something sleeping nearby. "You're early. Good habit." He slid a clipboard toward me. I signed where he pointed. My hand trembled a little from the cold, or maybe nerves. "Come on," he said, walking from behind the counter. "I'll give you the tour." The hum of lights followed us down each aisle. He explained pump systems, cash drawer, coffee machine, nothing unusual, until we reached the back office with the CCTV feeds. 3 screens showed the pumps, the interior of the store, and the back alley. Each flickered slightly, frames missing now and then. He tapped one monitor. For a second, the picture glitched, static rippling like water. I thought I saw a tall shape outside. Then it was gone. When I turned back, Mr. Garrison was watching me, expression unreadable. "You'll get used to the sounds," he said. "What sounds?" I asked. He just smiled. "You'll hear them." He walked me through the storage room next. Boxes, snacks, cleaning supplies, and something heavy under a tarp near the floor hatch. "What's that?" I asked. "Old pump line," he said quickly. "Don't worry about it." We returned to the front counter. He leaned over and tapped the laminated sheet taped beside the register. "Read those before you start." I leaned in. 7 bullet points in black marker, faded at the edges. Gas station, night shift safety protocol. 1. Always lock the main door by 1 a.m. sharp. 2. Do not unlock it for anyone until sunrise, even if they say they work here. 3. Keep the hallway lights flickering between 3 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. If the lights steady or go completely dark, reset the breaker immediately. 4. Do not hum, whistle, or play music after 3 a.m. Sound draws attention from outside the vents. 5. If you see a man in a cowboy hat standing by the pumps, do not speak or approach him. Do not look twice. Do not open the door. Repetition, another repetition. 7. Never walk the same aisle twice in one night. Footsteps should never echo from under the floor. 8. Check all CCTV monitors every 15 minutes. If one feed freezes, turn away from that camera's real location for at least 10 seconds. 9. Do not answer the intercom after 4 a.m., even if you recognize the voice. I looked up, half smiling. Is this an initiation prank? Mr. Garrison didn't smile back. These aren't company rules, Dean. They're survival rules. He said it plainly, like someone stating the weather. The last guy thought it was funny too. Third night in, he broke Rule 4. I waited for a punchline. None came. What happened to him? He stopped coming to work. The fluorescent hum filled the silence between us. Mr. Garrison finally turned toward the door. Clock in before midnight. Keep the coffee fresh. Follow every line on that sheet. He handed me the keys. When I took them, his hand lingered for a second, steady, warm, but trembling faintly. Then he left. The pickup's headlights swept across the store windows and vanished down the empty road. I stood alone behind the counter staring at the laminated paper. The bullet points seemed to shimmer slightly under the fluorescent light. Maybe it was just exhaustion. The clock above the coffee machine read 11:59 p.m. I turned the deadbolt, hearing it click into place. The sound echoed longer than it should have, almost like something else had locked with me inside.
The bolt clicked into place just as the clock turned midnight. The sound should have been comforting. It wasn't. I poured myself a cup of the gas station coffee, black, burnt, too bitter, but I kept my hands busy. Outside, the highway was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. The CCTV monitors showed the pumps, the empty lot, and the narrow hallway near the stockroom. The feeds kept flickering every few seconds, static rippling through like thin waves. I told myself it was old wiring. Everything's old in these places. To pass time, I stocked the candy rack, M&Ms, beef jerky, and bottles of energy drinks I'd never seen anyone actually buy. The hum of the refrigerators filled the store with a kind of mechanical heartbeat. Around 12:40 a.m., a truck's headlights passed on the highway, briefly flooding the glass with light. When it faded, I caught my reflection in the door. Tired eyes, faint smile, shoulders slumped. I looked like someone who'd stopped hoping things would get better and just wanted them to stop getting worse. I lit another Marlboro, cracked the door open just long enough to exhale the smoke, then locked it again. The cold air bit hard. Even the wind sounded thin out here. By 12:53, the coffee pot was nearly empty. The clock's second hand made a soft tick I hadn't noticed before. Then, footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Outside near the pumps. I leaned toward the CCTV monitor. Camera 2, pump view, showed nothing. Just the swinging chain of a flagpole. Then, the feed glitched. For 1 second, a shadow stretched across the concrete. A long, thin silhouette of a man standing between the pumps. When the frame returned, it was gone. I waited, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the lights. At 1:05 a.m., I made my first round. Checked the restrooms, stockroom, cooler. Everything fine except for one thing. Near the floor hatch in the storage room, a small dark stain. Oil, maybe. It hadn't been there during the tour. I knelt down, touched it. The concrete felt warm. A dull knock came from below, like something soft hitting metal from underneath. I stood up fast, bumping my head on a shelf. My pulse thudded against my neck. It didn't repeat. "Old pipes," I muttered, half laughing to hear my own voice. Back at the counter, I checked the monitors again. All clear. 1:17 a.m., another knock. Louder. The kind that doesn't echo through metal, but through bone. I forced myself to breathe, grabbed the rule sheet from the counter, and scanned it again. Nothing about knocking. Just don't walk the same aisle twice. Easy enough. When I looked up, the CCTV feed had frozen. Camera 2, the one pointed at the pumps, stuck on a single frame. A tall figure now stood under the gas sign. Long coat, wide brim hat. My throat went dry. I turned away from the screen, counted to 10 like the instructions said for frozen feeds, then looked back. Empty again. I let out a shaky breath. Jesus, Dean, you're losing it already. But my reflection in the black monitor didn't breathe when I did.
The bolt clicked into place just as the clock turned midnight. The sound should have been comforting. It wasn't. I poured myself a cup of the gas station coffee, black, burnt, too bitter, but it kept my hands busy. Outside, the highway was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. The CCTV monitors showed the pumps, the empty lot, and the narrow hallway near the stockroom. The feeds kept flickering every few seconds, static rippling through like thin waves. I told myself it was old wiring. Everything's old in these places. To pass time, I stocked the candy rack. M&Ms, beef jerky, and bottles of energy drinks I'd never seen anyone actually buy. The hum of the refrigerators filled the store with a kind of mechanical heartbeat. Around 12:40 a.m., a truck's headlights passed on the highway, briefly flooding the glass with light. When it faded, I caught my reflection in the door. Tired eyes, faint smile, shoulders slumped. I looked like someone who stopped hoping things would get better and just wanted them to stop getting worse. I lit another Marlboro, cracked the door open just long enough to exhale the smoke, then locked it again. The cold air bit hard. Even the wind sounded thin out here. By 12:53, the coffee pot was nearly empty. The clock's second hand made a soft tick I hadn't noticed before. Then, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, outside near the pumps. I leaned toward the CCTV monitor. Camera 2, pump view, showed nothing. Just the swinging chain of a flagpole. Then the feed glitched. For 1 second, a shadow stretched across the concrete, a long, thin silhouette of a man standing between the pumps. When the frame returned, it was gone. I waited, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the lights. At 1:05 a.m., I made my first round. Checked the restrooms, stockroom, cooler, everything fine except for one thing. Near the floor hatch in the storage room, a small dark stain. Oil, maybe. It hadn't been there during the tour. I knelt down, touched it. The concrete felt warm. A dull knock came from below, like something soft hitting metal from underneath. I stood up fast, bumping my head on a shelf. My pulse thudded against my neck. It didn't repeat. "Old pipes," I muttered, half laughing to hear my own voice. Back at the counter, I checked the monitors again. All clear. 1:17 a.m., another knock. Louder. The kind that doesn't echo through metal, but through bone. I forced myself to breathe. Grabbed the rule sheet from the counter and scanned it again. Nothing about knocking. Just don't walk the same aisle twice. Easy enough. When I looked up, the CCTV feed had frozen. Camera 2, the one pointed at the pumps, stuck on a single frame. A tall figure now stood under the gas sign. Long coat, wide brim hat. My throat went dry. I turned away from the screen, counted to 10, like the instructions said for frozen feeds, then looked back. Empty again. I let out a shaky breath. Jesus, Dean, you're losing it already. But my reflection in the black monitor didn't breathe when I did.
The sun rose pale and cold, the way light does after snow, except there hadn't been any. The road outside looked the same as always. Cracked asphalt, empty horizon, one stubborn tumbleweed crawling across the shoulder. I sat in the driver's seat of my Civic, half asleep, half stuck between thoughts. The $175 payment had already hit my account. I transferred most of it straight to the overdue rent balance. The rest, I didn't want to think about. I should have quit. Mr. Garrison hadn't texted, hadn't called. The silence between us felt like another rule no one wrote down. I told myself the same thing I'd said 100 times before any bad shift. Money first, fear later. I drove to the diner 10 miles south, ate cold eggs and scrolled my phone. Still no signal. The waitress didn't make eye contact. When asked for change for the coffee machine, she said,
We don't do coins anymore, though I could see a jar full of them behind her. By dusk, I was back on the highway. The gas station appeared like an echo. Small, flickering, too familiar. The Camry sat parked by the dumpster. No driver. Inside, the air was colder than outside. The hum of the refrigerators sounded slower, deeper, like the machines were breathing through a heavy mask. I clocked in at 7:02 p.m., made coffee, and sat behind the counter. The rules sheet waited where I left it. The edges looked more faded now, the ink bleeding faintly under the plastic cover. I touched it without meaning to. The plastic felt warm. At 9:40, I restocked the chips and candy. By midnight, I'd smoked twice as much as usual. Every so often, I thought I heard something. A creak in the vents, a whisper, like air pushed through teeth, but it always stopped the moment I turned toward it. At 1:12 a.m., I switched to the pump cameras. No movement. But in the corner of the feed, a faint smudge appeared on the glass. Red, streaked, like hair pressed against it. When I blinked, it was gone. I laughed under my breath. Sleep deprivation, that's all. I wrote the sentence down in the logbook Mr. Garrison had given me. Every shift required entries. 2:13 a.m., all clear. Minor visual glitch on camera 2. Even the handwriting looked tired.
3:02 a.m. A noise came from the vents above the back cooler. Low at first, like an electrical hum. Then it shaped itself. Rising, falling, uncertain. Almost melodic. I froze, cup halfway to my lips. Rule 3. Do not hum, whistle, or play music after 3 a.m. I hadn't, but something else had started. I turned off the radio just to be sure it wasn't interference. The hum kept going, quieter now, almost embarrassed to be heard. I grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the cooler section. The beam cut across glass doors lined with drinks, chips, jerky. My reflection moved a beat slower inside the glass, faint and gray, not matching my pace exactly. When I stopped, it kept moving for half a step before freezing mid-stride. My chest tightened. The hum from the vent shifted deeper now, like a voice trying to form a word through static. "Hello?" I said quietly. It stopped immediately. For 10 full seconds, nothing. No sound, no flicker, not even the usual compressor buzz. Then something new. A slow tap, tap, tap from the metal vent cover above the freezer. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. I stood perfectly still. My flashlight flickered. When the beam steadied, faint finger marks showed through the dust on the vent cover, small, like a child's, pressed from the inside out. I stepped backward until my shoulder hit the candy rack. The hum started again. This time it wasn't a melody. It was breathing. I stumbled back to the counter and flipped through the rule sheet again, just to see it, just to remember something sane existed. 1. Do not hum, whistle, or play music after 3 a.m. Sound draws attention from outside the vents. Outside. That word sat heavy in my head. If something was inside the vent, what counted as outside anymore? The intercom light blinked once, just a flicker, and went dead. The air grew colder. I lit another cigarette and watched the smoke rise. Halfway up, it drifted sideways, pulled toward the storage hallway.
The knock came again, from beneath the floor this time. Slow, rhythmic, like something keeping time with the hum above. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed louder, trembling faintly. I checked the cameras. No one outside, but every screen seemed to vibrate slightly, as if the picture were trembling in fear of what it might show. Stay awake, Dean. Stay awake. Stay quiet. I poured another cup of coffee. My reflection in the surface rippled, pale and faceless. 3:28 a.m. The hum grew sharper, like a distant electrical surge. I remembered what Garrison said during the tour, his hand trembling slightly when he'd pointed to the rule sheet. These aren't company rules. They're for survival. I understood now. He wasn't joking. I unplugged the coffee machine to silence the hum, but it kept breathing. The vents exhaled a soft, cold mist that smelled faintly like rain on metal. Then, from somewhere deep inside the ducts, a voice whispered. Not words, just a low note that shaped itself into something familiar. My name. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't Garrison's either. It sounded like a memory someone was still learning to pronounce.
Dean? The lights flickered. The cigarette ash broke in half and fell across my wrist. I grabbed the walkie from the counter and pressed the button, though I wasn't sure who I expected to reach. Mr. Garrison? Static. Anyone on this channel? More static. Then, faintly, one sound. Not speech, just the click of a lighter. Once. Twice. Mine was already in my pocket. The walkie dropped from my hand. 4 a.m. The vent hum cut off mid-breath. The silence that followed felt endless. I stayed behind the counter, back against the wall, eyes on the flickering monitors. The first faint trace of dawn began to leak into the eastern sky outside. Somewhere in that silence, between the hiss of cooling metal and my own pulse, a single knock echoed again, this time from the glass door at the front. I didn't look.
I didn't look at the door when that first knock came. I just stared at the coffee machine until the sound stopped. 5 slow seconds, then nothing. I told myself it was a bird, maybe a truck shifting air down the road, but the air here didn't move unless something wanted it to. I wrote another line in the logbook. 4:11 a.m., possible vibration on glass. The handwriting looked worse than before, letters stretched thin like they were shaking too. When the sun came up, it didn't feel like morning. The light was too white, bleaching everything flat. I went outside to breathe. The air smelled of diesel and frost. No footprints in the dirt except mine. I opened the trunk of the Civic, pulled out a half-eaten bag of beef jerky, chewed a piece until my jaw ached. It didn't taste like anything. The payment notification buzzed on my phone. $175 received. I stared at the number. It looked smaller than it had yesterday. For a second, I thought about driving away. Then I pictured the eviction notice on my apartment door and the unopened hospital mail stacked on the counter. Money first, fear later. By evening, the wind had picked up. Dust scratched against the windows like fingernails. When I unlocked the door for my second night, the smell hit first. Something damp, metallic like wet rust. I brewed coffee, turned on the CCTV monitors, and told myself to focus on routine. Stock the chips, check the bathrooms, sweep the floor. Normal things. At 2:58 a.m., the humming in the vents started again. Fainter this time, like someone humming through water. I stayed still behind the counter, counting my breaths. Then the sound changed, shifted downward into a laugh. Quiet, broken, but definitely laughter. Female. I checked the hallway mirror. Nothing behind me. But on camera 3, the pump feed, a blur of color drifted across the edge of the frame. Red, moving like hair caught in wind. My throat went dry. I zoomed in, the picture pixelated. A figure stood by pump 2, slender, still,
hair down to her shoulders, face tilted toward the store. The lights flickered once. When they steadied, the frame was empty. A soft sound came from the freezer door behind me, fingertips brushing glass. I turned. Through the reflection in the cooler door, I saw her. Standing at the far end of the aisle, half-turned, red hair draped forward like a curtain. Her head twitched once, a small, unnatural movement, as if she'd heard a sound I hadn't. I blink. She was gone. Only my own outline remained, and even that seemed uncertain, edges fading in and out of the reflection. The laughter returned in the vents, softer now, repeating a rhythm. 3 short bursts, pause, 1 long exhale. I covered my ears, whispered to myself, "Not real, not real, not real." The laughter stopped. Something else answered. 1 knock under the floor.
3:19 a.m. The floor vibrated lightly, the tiles shifting with each knock like something exhaling underneath. Rule 5 floated through my head. Never walk the same aisle twice in one night. I realized I'd done exactly that. I backed toward the counter slowly, trying not to look down. The vibration followed 1 step behind, perfectly in sync. I stepped left. It followed. Right. Again. It wasn't under the floor anymore. It was following me. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it at the tile seams. Nothing. Just a fine line of dust trembling as if stirred by breath. Then the CCTV screen flickered. Camera 2 froze on a new frame. The cowboy man was back. He stood near the far pump, hat lowered, coat brushing his boots. The red-haired woman was behind him this time, hair blowing though the air outside was still. The monitor flickered once more, and both vanished. My pulse hammered. I turned the flashlight off and waited in darkness. A faint tapping resumed beneath the floor, slow, steady, confident. I crouched, pressed my palm flat against the tile. Something cold pressed back. I jerked away, hit the candy rack, sent M&Ms scattering across the floor. They rolled toward the back wall and disappeared under the counter gap, like the floor had swallowed them. The humming started again, this time from underneath. It rose through the tiles, vibrating the soles of my shoes. The air thickened with static. Every fluorescent bulb dimmed at once, humming like a throat clearing before words. I remembered Rule 2. Keep the hallway lights flickering between 3 and 4:30 a.m. The hallway light had gone steady. I ran to the breaker box, flipped the switch up and down until the bulb finally stuttered. The vibration underfoot eased. The hum faded. But the laughter returned, closer now, echoing from the glass door at the front. It sounded like it was on the other side, waiting for me to answer. I turned off the radio. The laughter didn't stop. It just changed direction, sliding along the walls like it was circling the room. I forced myself to check the monitors again. Camera 1, empty. Camera 2, static. Camera 3, frozen frame of the storage hallway. In that frozen frame, something long and thin crawled across the floor, arms folding wrong at the elbows. It stopped directly beneath the lens, never face visible. I stared at it too long. The screen twitched once, then went black. The sound of metal bending echoed under the counter, a long creak like someone forcing a door open underwater. I backed away. The air smelled like burnt copper. I whispered to the empty store, "I didn't break anything. I followed every..." Before I could finish, the intercom crackled again. Not speech, just a breath, low and tired. Then a single word, stretched thin, almost kind. "Stay." The mic light died. My chest ached like something had squeezed it. I sank onto the stool behind the register and stared at the clock.
4:27 a.m. 3 minutes until safety.
I kept my eyes on the floor, waiting for dawn. The vibration stopped at exactly 4:29. Outside, the darkness began to gray at the edges. I didn't move until the sun touched the edge of the pumps. When I finally looked up, the laminated rule sheet on the counter had curled at one corner. The last line, "Do not answer the intercom after 4 a.m. even if you recognize the voice," had a fresh crease running through it, as if someone had pressed a finger there recently. I didn't touch it. The silence in the store felt heavier than any sound. I turned off the lights and sat in the parking lot until the sun rose fully, cigarette shaking between my fingers, the smoke curling wrong in the still air. 2 nights down, 3 to go.
Morning came without color. The sunlight looked wrong again, bright but cold, like it was shining through a thick pane of glass. I drove into town, what little there was of it, a hardware store, a post office, and a diner with a faded sign that read Eats. No one spoke much. The waitress who had served me yesterday didn't look up when I sat down. I ordered coffee and eggs I couldn't taste. My hands still smelled faintly of gasoline. Every so often I checked my phone, pretending to expect a message, but there was still no service. Not even Wi-Fi. The date on the screen hadn't changed since the first night. I dialed anyway, Mr. Garrison's number. This time it rang. He answered on the third tone. His voice was steady, but thin like coming through water. "Dean?" "Yeah, it's me." "You made it 2 nights." "Made it?" I laughed quietly. "That's an interesting choice of words." He didn't respond. I asked the only thing that mattered. "You said something about the last guy. What happened?" A pause. Then, "You'll see all of them if you keep breaking the little rules." "Wait, all of who?" The line filled with static. For a second I heard breathing, not his, not mine. And then the call cut. The waitress slid the check toward me without meeting my eyes. Her hands trembled slightly. When I reached the door, she said, almost whispering, "Don't hum in there." I froze. "What did you just—" But she was already turning away. The drive back to the gas station felt longer than before. The highway seemed to have stretched. The sign flickered on the horizon, same as always, but the letters looked thinner. GAS instead of gas. I parked beside the building. The same Camry sat there again, coated in a new layer of dust. Inside, the air was heavy with the same metallic dampness. The rule sheet still hung beside the register. The edges it curled upward as if from heat, but the air was cold enough to see my breath. The floor tiles near the counter had darkened. I didn't step on them. I checked the CCTV feeds, no movement, but every few seconds, one monitor flickered black for a single frame, then returned to normal. Always the same one, camera 2, the pump view. I opened the logbook. The previous entry wasn't mine. "You shouldn't be here." Same handwriting style, same pen, just not my hand. I stared at it for a long time, then closed the book and locked it in the drawer. At 11:48 p.m., I made coffee, slower this time. My hands felt heavy, like they were learning hesitation from the air. By midnight, the building had gone completely silent. No hum, no knock, not even the refrigerator compressor. That silence stayed until 12:57, when something scratched from beneath the floor. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was fingernails on concrete.
The scratch came again, drawn out, patient. Then a small creak as the floor tile nearest the counter lifted slightly, then settled back down. I knelt slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam cut a thin line of dust swirling up through the gap. It moved like it was breathing. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was talking to. The radio on the counter clicked on by itself, white noise spilling through the static. I froze. A voice began to shape inside the static. Not words, just rhythm, like something copying speech but missing the language.
It sounded almost curious. I shut the radio off. The noise continued for 2 full seconds afterward. The tile lifted again, slightly higher this time, like the floor was taking a slow, controlled breath. The smell that came through the crack was damp metal, like rusted water. I took a step back, hit the cooler door, and turned toward the reflection in the glass. Something was standing behind me. Not close, near the hallway. Tall, too thin, arms longer than they should be, hanging down past the knees. It didn't move. I turned slowly, heart thudding, but the hallway was empty. When I looked back at the reflection, nothing. The tile clicked back into place. A faint sigh came from underneath, almost like disappointment. I checked the cameras, all 3 feeds still working, but the hallway view glitched, static like snow falling upward. In one frozen frame, I saw the shape again. Then, for the first time, a sound came through the monitor's tiny built-in speaker. A low, muffled whisper, impossible, like the camera itself had found a voice. It repeated one word again and again, though the signal broke around it. Down. I muted the feed. Outside, the pumps clicked, once, then twice, as if someone had lifted a nozzle and hung it back. No cars in sight. I remembered something Garrison said during the tour, voice flat but eyes full of memory. You'll hear them before you see them. Maybe this was the them. I turned the breaker off and on to force the lights into a flicker, just to remind the building who was in charge. The shadows danced across the aisles. One of them didn't move when the lights did. It stayed, fixed against the far wall, long and still. I pointed the flashlight at it. The beam passed through empty space. The shadow stretched, twisted once like a flag in wind, and folded back into itself. The fluorescent light above me popped, showering a few sparks. The entire store dimmed, humming louder now as though drawing breath with me. The floor under the counter shifted again, just one hard pulse like something testing the strength of the slab. I grabbed the rule sheet, read it line by line as if reciting scripture could make it true. 1. Lock the door. 2. Keep the lights flickering. 3. Don't hum after 3. 4. Don't answer the intercom after 4. 5. Never walk the same aisle twice. 6. Check monitors every 15 minutes. 7. Don't answer the intercom after 4. I whispered each one aloud, steadying my voice. The humming underfoot stopped when I reached Rule 4. For a moment, everything was quiet again. Then the monitor nearest me flickered. For a single frozen frame, the cowboy man stood beneath the sign, facing the store. Behind him, just over his shoulder, the red-haired woman smiled with her head tilted too far to the side, like her neck was remembering how to hold itself upright. I turned away from the screen, counting slowly to 10. When I faced it again, they were gone. Only the pumps remained, gently swaying from a wind I couldn't feel. I sank onto the stool behind the counter, staring at the rule sheet, mouthing the words like prayer. The smell of rust faded. The air went still. Somewhere in the dark, something whispered once, low and final. Not from the vents, not from below, from inside the room itself.
Good. I didn't sleep that morning. There was no real morning anymore, just light without warmth. I sat in my car until the sun turned white and the horizon blurred into nothing. The world outside the gas station felt drained of edges, as though everything had been sketched over one too many times. At some point, I noticed my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't smiling, but my reflection was, just for a heartbeat. I tore the mirror down and tossed it into the glove compartment. I told myself not to think about it, not to believe it, but belief wasn't a choice anymore. It was a side effect of staying alive. By sunset, I was back at the store. The wind had stopped. The flag on the pole hung limp, motionless. Even the insects had gone silent. When I unlocked the door, a faint bell above it chimed. A sound I'd never noticed before. I didn't like it. The coffee pot was half full, even though I hadn't brewed any since dawn. Someone, or something, had poured a cup. The mug sat beside the register, a ring of wet coffee marking the counter, steam long gone cold. I picked it up, and for 1 second, the ceramic felt warm again. I dropped it. It shattered on the floor, spilling nothing. The coffee inside had already evaporated. At 12:23 a.m., the hum began again, a low, electric vibration pulsing through the floor. I checked the breaker. It wasn't coming from the wiring. The CCTV monitors flickered in rhythm with the hum, static waves passing across the screens like the whole building was breathing. Then, through the pump camera, I saw movement. The cowboy man stood there again. Same hat, same stance, motionless under the buzzing sign. But this time he was closer, maybe 15 feet from the door. He wasn't facing the pumps anymore. He was looking straight at the glass. I leaned closer to the monitor, heart hammering. Something in the video quality looked wrong. The pixels around his head shimmered faintly like heat haze. When I focused, I realized the shimmer wasn't heat. It was teeth. A smile. Too wide. Too many. The teeth stretched past the corners of the shadow where his face should be. Then the feed jumped. For a split second, the image froze, his head tilted up toward the camera, and in that frame, the hat brim lifted just enough to see the eyes beneath. Not eyes, just two endless black circles. No whites, no color, deep as the space between channels on a dead TV. The monitor glitched, colors inverted, then went black. The hum stopped. I felt the air thicken. The sound of something wet dragged across the tile behind the counter. When I turned, nothing was there. Just the pieces of the shattered mug, still dry. I looked back at the monitor. The camera feed was live again. The cowboy was gone. But behind the glass of the store door, faintly reflected in the neon light, a new outline waited. A second figure, smaller, leaning sideways like a marionette half cut from its strings. Hair like a flame. The red-haired woman. The reflection swayed, then straightened. Her face pressed against the glass from the outside. The sound it made was soft, like fabric sliding on wet paper. I didn't move. Her hair stuck to the surface as though she breathed against it. Then she smiled, just enough for me to see the shape of her teeth. They weren't sharp, but they were too long. She mouthed something I couldn't hear. Every letter ended in breath, fogging the glass white. The fog faded and she was gone. I looked down. The rule sheet's corner had curled again, as if reacting to heat. I checked the clock. 2:11 a.m. The night wasn't halfway done.
When dawn came, it wasn't dawn. It was just the darkness pretending to give up. The sky lightened, but the sun didn't rise. It just hovered, somewhat unseen, tinting the world a dull silver. The store windows were coated with dew from the inside. Every breath I took fogged the glass more. I wanted to leave, I really did. But the thought of driving away didn't make sense anymore. Where would the road go if the sun wasn't real? So I stayed. I restocked the shelves like any other morning, though most of the candy was gone now. The jerky rack was half empty. The chips had been torn open, crumbs scattered in strange patterns, spiral shapes that circled the tile cracks like symbols. When I knelt to sweep them up, the floor was warm again. Not from heat, from movement. Something shifted underneath, slow and steady, like the pulse of a huge animal sleeping beneath the concrete. I froze, broom in hand. The tiles lifted slightly under my knee. I whispered, "Stop!" before I could stop myself. The tiles settled. The broom handle trembled once, as though the thing beneath it brushed it. I backed away, step by step, not taking my eyes off the floor. When I reached the counter, the CCTV monitors clicked back on by themselves. Camera 1 showed the pumps, empty. Camera 2, the hallway, static. Camera 3, the back door open. It shouldn't have been open. I'd locked it myself. I picked up the flashlight and aimed it at the monitor. For half a second, the static cleared. In the doorway, a figure stood half-crouched, face too pale to be skin, limbs bent wrong. Then it crawled out of frame. I dropped the flashlight, scrambled toward the breaker panel, flipped every switch up and down. The lights blinked, flickered, returned to dim life. When I looked back at the monitors, all 3 feeds had frozen, each showing the cowboy man, in 3 different places. At the pumps, in the hallway, behind the counter, right where I was standing. I turned around. Nothing. The store was empty. The hum started again, low and deep, but not from the floor this time, from the air itself, as if the space between the walls had learned how to breathe. I sat down behind the register, head in my hands. When I looked up again, the sun was suddenly higher, bright, harsh, too fast, too abrupt, like time had skipped ahead without me. I exhaled and turned toward the window. Something was written in the condensation. Letters. Shaky, but clear. "Don't look outside for help." I stared at it until it faded back into mist.
The morning didn't feel like morning anymore. It just looked brighter. Nothing changed in the air, in the silence, in me. I sat in the Civic for hours, watching the horizon pretend to move. The road stayed empty, the wind didn't blow, the world felt paused. I told myself I'd leave today. I'd drive until I hit another town, another job, anywhere. There wasn't this. But when I tried starting the car, the engine turned once, coughed, and quit. The gas gauge flickered between half and empty, a metronome of mockery. I opened the door and stepped outside. The asphalt smelled like rain, even though it hadn't rained in weeks. My breath came out white. I lit a Marlboro and watched the smoke trail upward, waiting for wind that never came. The gas station sign buzzed faintly in the distance. 2 letters burned out now, just GA glowing red against the gray sky. I wanted to believe that meant something, a warning, an omen, but it was just a broken bulb. By noon, the air in the car felt heavy, too hot to sit in. I went back inside the store. Everything looked exactly how I'd left it. The register drawer half open, the cup beside the coffee pot, ring of cold liquid still staining the counter. The rule sheet hung in its place, unchanged. The edges had curled further from the heat of the fluorescent lights, but the same 7 lines stared back, unaltered, absolute. I ran finger across the surface of the plastic and whispered, "I followed you, every one." My voice didn't sound like mine. It came back smaller, thinner, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The radio hissed once, a burst of static that sounded almost like a sigh. By the time the sun dropped behind the hills, I had convinced myself it was just exhaustion. Sleep deprivation does strange things. It blurs what's real and what's waiting. At 11:52 p.m., I clocked in. The sound of the punch card sliding through the machine echoed too loud in the quiet room. The clock struck midnight, and the hum began again. Steady, predictable, almost comforting now. Almost.
The night started slow. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. No footsteps, No laughter, just the dull rhythm of lights flickering above me. I began to think maybe the worst was over. Maybe the rules were working. At 2:07 a.m., the hum in the vents shifted tone. Deeper this time, like something moving through water-filled pipes. I froze, mid-sip of coffee, listening. The hum paused, then answered itself in a higher pitch. 2 notes, 2 different sources. I remembered the sound from the second night, the one that had mimicked the voice through static. It wasn't the same now. This one was closer. The coffee machine clicked off by itself. The silence afterward pressed against my chest like a hand. I looked up at the CCTV. Camera 1, outside pumps, empty. Camera 2, hallway. A faint shimmer, almost heat haze, rippled across the tiles. Camera 3, storage room. The floor hatch trembled once, dust falling from the edges. I kept watching, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The shaking came in pulses now, perfectly timed to the flicker of the overhead bulbs. Every time the light dimmed, the floor rose. I flipped the breaker, forcing the lights into a faster flicker. The shaking slowed, then stopped altogether. I exhaled. Good. The radio crackled behind me. Not a song, just the faint hiss of white noise mixed with breath. A whisper crawled through it, low, broken, almost soft. Said, "Don't stop." The words were barely sound. They came like wind pressed into syllables. I turned the radio off. The static continued for 3 seconds after the dial hit 0. Then silence. The hum in the vents deepened again. I could hear it crawling along the metal ducts, circling above me. The air smelled faintly sweet, like wet soil. I looked up. Condensation dripped from one vent, slow, rhythmic, 1 drop at a time. Each drop hit the counter and rolled toward me, leaving dark trails across the laminate. Then the lights flickered hard enough to throw shadows against every wall. For a heartbeat, I saw her again, the red-haired woman, reflected in the freezer glass, standing in the aisle behind me, head bowed, arms at her sides. Her hair moved, though there was no wind. I didn't turn. When I blinked, the reflection was gone. I backed up to the counter, eyes locked on the camera feeds. Camera 1 showed her now, outside by the pumps. She was turned away, facing the road. The long strands of her hair floated in a wind I couldn't feel. In the same frame, barely visible behind her, stood the cowboy man, hat brim lowered, body outlined in static. He wasn't facing her. He was facing the store. My throat got dry. They never appeared together before. The rules never said what happened when they did.
The fluorescent light above me flickered too slow, steadying for longer than it should. I ran for the breaker panel, slammed the switch up and down until the flicker returned. The hum quieted, but a low vibration crawled through the floor in response. The floor sleeper. All 3 at once. I went still. The vents exhaled softly. The fog outside thickened. I stared at the monitors again. Every feed showed them both, standing motionless now. The woman turned first, tilting her head as though listening for something inside. Then, the cowboy lifted his face, slow and deliberate, revealing the faint white curve of that impossible smile. Both stared directly at the door. The pumps shut off on their own. Every nozzle clinked back into place simultaneously. The sound of metal striking metal rang through the still air like a bell. I whispered, "I didn't break any rules." The radio switched back on. No static this time, just breathing. I shut my eyes, waited for dawn. When I opened them, the monitors were blank again. The air was silent, too silent. The clock read 3:46 a.m. I turned slowly toward the rule sheet, reading each line under my breath, my voice shaking. When I reached Rule 4, the glass door at the front clicked softly, like a lock being tested from the outside. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The door didn't open, but the faint shape of a hat brim pressed against the other side of the glass just enough to blot out my reflection. Then it lifted. Gone. The light steadied, hum gone, air still. 3:49 a.m., 1 minute before the intercom rule.
I sat behind the counter, whispering to the clock, begging it to turn faster. When it did, the red light on the intercom flicked on. I didn't touch it, didn't speak. A soft voice filled the silence. Low, gentle, female. Good boy. Then the light died.
The morning after the voice called me good boy, I didn't move for nearly an hour. The sunlight felt fake again, too thin. The rule sheet fluttered slightly against the wall, though the air was still. I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the brim of that hat pressed against the glass and heard the whisper from the vents, soft, human, patient. By late afternoon, I gave up pretending to rest. I sat behind the steering wheel of the Civic, just watching the gas station through the windshield. Nothing changed. No cars. No sound. Just the flickering GA sign, fading more each hour. At 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number. Still there? I typed back, "Who is this?" But the message didn't send. It stayed in gray, waiting, forever unsent. The screen flashed, "No service." I exhaled, finished a cigarette, and went inside. The coffee machine was already on. Someone had poured a cup. It sat steaming beside the register. Same mug I'd used last night. I didn't touch it. Instead, I flipped the breaker panel open. Every switch was in the same position except one. The hallway lights were off. Rule 2, keep them flickering between 3 and 4:30. It wasn't even midnight yet, but I flipped the switch on anyway. The light stuttered awake, humming. The floor under my feet vibrated once. It felt like approval. The hum in the vents followed immediately, echoing the rhythm of the flicker. It was faint at first, then stronger, layering on itself like multiple things breathing in time. By 12:47 a.m., the hum was everywhere, inside the walls, the tiles, the lights. The store felt alive. I leaned against the counter, whispering to no one, "You're not breaking anything. You're following the rules." The air seemed to listen. Then something inside the vents laughed. A low, soft sound, the kind you make when you understand something the other person doesn't. The laughter traveled through the ducts, from ceiling to wall to floor. Then it stopped directly above the register. I looked up. The metal vent cover bulged outward slightly, as if the air behind it were pushing. One of the screws began to turn on its own, unscrewing with a slow, grinding sound. It fell, clinked onto the counter, and rolled into the coffee cup. The hum paused. From behind the vent came a whisper, barely audible over my own heartbeat. "Don't let him in." I froze. "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. Silence. Then a soft knock from the glass door at the front. The sound was sharp this time, deliberate. I turned my head slowly. The cowboy man stood outside, closer than ever. His hand still pressed to the glass. The brim of his hat hid his face, but beneath it I saw motion, something stretching. He wasn't knocking with his knuckles. He was scratching with a nail. A single line of glass shivered, not broken, just scored thin. He dragged the nail again, slower. I backed away from the door until my spine hit the counter. The vent above me rattled once more, the loose screw hole breathing air in and out like a small mouth. The whisper came again, louder now, urgent, echoing from both the vent and the floor below. "Don't let him in." The scratching stopped. When I looked back, the cowboy was gone, but the glass now held 3 long parallel scratches, faint but visible under the flickering light, like claw marks trying to spell something. The clock read 3:03 a.m. The hum faded again, replaced by the sound of slow, dripping water. Except it wasn't water. The drops were thicker, darker. When one hit my hand, it smelled like oil.
The dripping continued through the rest of the hour. I placed a paper cup beneath the vent to catch it. Though the cup stayed dry, the sound existed, but whatever was falling didn't. At 3:40 a.m.,
The lights steadied. No flicker, no pulse. I flipped the breaker. Nothing changed. The hum cut off completely. The silence was wrong. It didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. I checked the CCTV monitors. Camera 1, outside pumps. Still. Camera 2, hallway. Static. Camera 3, counter view. Black screen. I tapped the side of the monitor. The image flickered on. And there he was, the cowboy man, standing behind me on the screen. Exactly behind me. I didn't move. I stared at the reflection in the monitor's dark glass. There was nothing in the room, but the screen kept showing him, closer now, the hat brim tilting upward, revealing just enough to see the suggestion of a mouth. It moved once, slowly, then again. He was saying something, but there was no sound. The lights began to flicker again, slower this time, almost like Morse code. Long flash, short, short, long. The rhythm repeated 3 times before stopping. I realized, absurdly, that it was spelling something. I didn't want to know what. I turned the monitor off. The hum and the vents resumed instantly, now faster, matching my heartbeat. I stepped backward, nearly tripping over the stool. The intercom light blinked. Once. Then again. 4 a.m. Rule 7. Do not answer after 4 a.m. even if you recognize the voice. The red light glowed steady. Then came a voice. Not mine. Not Garrison's. Not anyone I'd ever known. "Dean, please, unlock the door." The voice trembled like it was crying. A woman's voice. "He's not gone yet. He'll be back." I covered my ears. "No, no, please." The sound pressed against the air, flattening it. The rule sheet fluttered violently against the wall. The vent above the counter groaned like something heavy was crawling inside it. Then the light on the intercom shut off. I waited. Nothing. I counted each second aloud just to keep the silence from swallowing me. When I reached 23, the lights dimmed to black. The CCTV screens flickered back to life, every feed showing the same image. The cowboy standing by the pumps, the red-haired woman standing behind him, and beneath their feet, the ground moving like something was breathing under it. All 3, aligned. The flicker steadied, bright white. Then the screens went dark, and in the reflection of the glass door, I saw my own outline, still, silent, backlit by the dying lights. But there was something standing just behind it, too tall, too still, the brim of a hat.
I told myself I wasn't coming back. That morning, after the lights died and the reflection in the glass shifted, I packed what little I had. Phone charger, cigarettes, half a bag of jerky, and walked out. I didn't lock the door behind me. The air outside was colder than it had any right to be for late summer. My breath fogged in front of me like smoke. The Civic sat right where I left it, coated in a thin film of dust. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine turned once, twice, then nothing. I tried again. Silence. The headlights flickered on for half a second, reflecting off the glass door of the store. For that half second, I saw the faint outline of someone standing inside the store. Motionless. Not me. The keys slipped from my hand. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was watching. I stepped out, checked my phone. No signal. The clock read 6:13 a.m., but the sun was still low, barely lighting the road. The gas station sign glowed faintly behind me. Only the letter A remained lit. I started walking down the highway, backpack slung over one shoulder. I didn't look back. The road stayed straight for miles,
Then, somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd mile marker, I saw it again. The gas station. Right where it had always been. Same broken sign, same empty lot, same Civic, still parked near pump 3. I stopped walking. The horizon shimmered faintly, like heat mirage, but the air was freezing. I whispered, "No." Then I turned and started running. The air thickened with every step, harder to breathe, heavier, until I felt like I was running underwater. When I stopped, gasping for breath, I was standing in front of the store again. The door was open now. The bell above it chimed once, soft and tired, though no wind moved it. The lights inside were on, flickering faintly. I didn't go in. I just stood there, watching the flicker reflect off the glass, watching the shadow it made on the floor shift between 1 shape and 3. The smell of gasoline hung thick in the air. Then I heard the hum again, low, drawn out, almost like it was waiting for me to recognize it. It came from the vents, from the floor, from the lights. It came from everywhere. I stepped inside. The register lights blinked once. The coffee machine turned on by itself, beginning to brew. I sat behind the register. The rules sheet hung in its place, edges yellow in now. Same 7 lines, same faded ink. It looked like scripture. I whispered them one by one, as steady as I could, though my voice trembled halfway through. When I reached Rule 4, the vent above me groaned, and from the camera feed beside the register, I saw him again, the cowboy man, standing in the same place he'd always stood, by the pumps under the half-lit sign, except now, he wasn't alone. The red-haired woman was beside him, facing away from the store, her hair moving gently as if underwater. The third movement came from beneath them, the ground itself shifting, swelling, breathing. 3 rules, 3 entities, all at once. I looked up from the screen. Outside, the fog had begun to thicken, rolling across the lot like slow smoke. The cowboy's shadow stretched toward the glass door inch by inch. I shut my eyes, whispered to myself, "Don't speak. Don't look twice." The hum grew louder, pressing against my chest. When I opened my eyes again, the screen had gone white. For a split second, written in the static, I thought I saw words, faint, almost burned into the screen. "We never left." Then the screen went black.
By 2 a.m., the fog had seeped inside. It clung to the aisles, rolled across the tiles, brushed against my legs as I walked. I turned on the hallway lights and forced the flicker. It buzzed weakly, struggling to hold rhythm. The hum inside the vents rose again, lower this time, slower. It sounded like breathing, but not mine. Then came the knock. Once, under the counter. Then again, farther down the aisle. I froze. The tiles near the stockroom door shifted. Just a millimeter. Just enough to feel the air beneath them move. I whispered, "Stay down." The floor obeyed for a second. And then it lifted. The hatch at the back of the storage room rattled twice and swung open. I aimed the flashlight towards it. The beam stopped halfway down the ladder, hitting air that shimmered like heat haze. Something moved in that shimmer. A pale hand, bone thin and trembling, reached halfway up the ladder rung and slid back down. I slammed the hatch shut, threw a box of paper towels on top, and stepped back until my shoulders hit the door frame. The lights flickered again. The hum from the vents changed direction. It wasn't overhead anymore. It was inside the room with me. The coffee pot began to shake on the counter, rattling against the machine. I looked up. Every vent cover in the ceiling was breathing outward, expanding with each exhale. The air smelled like rust and rain. From the front door, I heard the sound of spurs. Slow. Deliberate. The cowboy man's silhouette appeared against the fog outside. The woman followed behind, her reflection swimming across the glass. They didn't move closer. They just stood there. The lights flickered one last time and steadied. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then the sound came from below, deep, resonant, like a sigh from the earth itself. The tiles cracked in a clean line down the middle of the floor. Black dust rose from the split. Something beneath began to move. Not a hand this time, not a person, something larger, shifting in slow circles beneath the concrete. I backed up against the counter, staring as the crack widened. Through the fog on the glass, I could still see the two figures outside, motionless, waiting. The hum reached its loudest point, vibrating through my teeth. And then all at once, the fog outside pressed against the windows, flattening against the glass like a living thing trying to get in. The cowboy's hat brim lifted. The red-haired woman turned her head toward me, and from the floor below, something laughed. It wasn't her voice or his. It was mine, distorted, wrong. I clapped my hands over my ears and shouted, "Stop!" Everything stopped. The hum, the flicker, even the air. For one perfect second, there was absolute silence. Then the vent above me whispered, calm and clear, as if right next to my ear. "He's inside."
The silence after that whisper didn't fade. It just held me there, frozen. "He's inside." The words circled through my head until they stopped sounding like language. The vents above the counter stayed still. No hum, no air, nothing. The crack in the floor remained open, dust drifting upward like smoke. I waited for something to happen, movement, sound, anything. Nothing came. At 3:12 a.m., I forced myself to check the CCTV monitors again. Camera 1, outside pumps, empty. Camera 2, hallway, dark. Camera 3, counter. On the third feed, I saw the back of my own head. I stared at the screen. I wasn't moving, but the man on the monitor was. He stood behind the counter, just like me, same jacket, same posture, except he was breathing faster. I blinked once. The man blinked later. The delay was small, but it was there. Then he smiled. I stepped back, nearly tripping over the stool. The image leaned closer to the camera, face darkened by the flicker. He whispered something, words I couldn't hear through the static. Then his eyes moved up, as if looking past the lens, straight at me. Every light in the store dimmed. The hum returned, low and throbbing, pulsing through the floor. I grabbed the rule sheet, reading it out loud just to ground myself. 1, lock the door. 2, keep the hallway lights flickering. The power surged. The lights steadied. No flicker. I ran for the breaker, flipping it again and again, but the switches didn't move. They were stiff, fused into place. The humming deepened. The mirror behind the counter shuddered slightly, like the glass itself was vibrating. Behind my reflection, I saw the outline of the man on the screen. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was standing directly behind me. I turned fast, flashlight raised. Nothing. Just the aisle. Empty. I turned back toward the mirror. Now he was gone from there, too. The store was darker than before. The windows had gone black, the fog outside too dense to see through. Somewhere near the back room, something fell, soft, like a cardboard box sliding off a shelf. Then the intercom clicked on. 4:02 a.m. The red light glowed. Dean. It was my voice. Low, steady, familiar. I froze.
staring at the speaker. "The door's open." My heart stopped. I turned to look. The front door was wide open. The wind should have blown in, but the air was still. The fog held its shape, pressed flat against the threshold, like a pane of glass. I ran to the door, slammed it shut, threw the lock. The instant the bolt clicked, the intercom screamed, a burst of static so loud it cracked the speaker grill. Then silence. The clock above the register clicked softly to 4:06 a.m. I looked at the rule sheet again, every line underlined in pencil from nights of rereading. 7 lines, 7 chances, one by one, falling apart. I whispered the only one that still made sense. "Don't answer the intercom." And I hadn't, not really. But it had still spoken.
By 4:10 a.m., the fog outside had turned solid, dense white pressing against every window, blotting out the world. The lights overhead flickered slower and slower until each blink felt like a heartbeat. The hum from the vents synced with it, rising and falling like breathing. I sat on the floor behind the counter, back against the register, reading the rule sheet over and over just to fill the silence. The words were starting to blur. The edges of the letters shimmered slightly, like heat waves. I blinked, and they seemed to move, curling at the edges, shifting between lines. When I looked again, the text was normal, or I wanted to believe it was. At 4:19 a.m., something brushed the outside of the glass door. Not a hand, something larger. The frame of the door rattled once. Then again, the lights dimmed. Through the frosted fog, faint silhouettes pressed against the glass. 2 shapes, the cowboy man, the red-haired woman. They stood side by side, motionless, the fog swirling around them like water in a tank. Then a third shadow appeared behind them, something taller, broader, moving differently. The floor beneath me shook. The hum rose into a deep, metallic rumble. The cowboy turned his head slightly toward the woman, and the fog behind them pulsed outward like breath against glass. They weren't knocking anymore. They were waiting. The rule sheet fluttered once. The coffee cup beside me rattled. Then, softly, the intercom light came on again. 4:22 a.m. I shut my eyes. "Dean?" my voice said through the static. Quiet this time, almost gentle. "It's already open."
I looked up. The door was closed, but through the CCTV, camera 1 showed it wide open. The fog poured inside on screen, filling the aisles like water. Then the camera flickered to static. Camera 2, hallway, showed movement. The tiles shifted like something crawling just under the floor. Camera 3, behind the counter, focused on my face. Not live, not current. I was standing behind the counter, staring straight into the lens, whispering something over and over. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to read my own lips. The playback distorted, stuttering between frames, my expression flickering between calm and terrified. Then, for a single frame, the cowboy appeared beside me on screen, his hat brushing the top of the frame, smile gleaming through static. The screen went black. The lights died. And from outside, through the thick white fog, came the faint sound of boots on asphalt. Slow, measured, coming closer. I pressed my back to the wall, flashlight shaking in my hand. The steps stopped, at the door. One single knock. Not violent, not impatient, just certain. Then a second sound followed, from beneath the floor. The same rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. The vents whispered above me, soft and low. It's time. The glass door creaked. Something pressed against it from outside. A hand, palm flat, fingers too long. Then the latch turned once. Click. The door didn't open. It just shivered. The hum stopped. The light above the counter flickered once, just enough to catch the faint reflection of a figure standing behind me in the dark. I didn't turn around. I just whispered the only words I had left.
I followed every rule. The reflection smiled, and the light went out. Dean's fate remains unknown. The rules held until they didn't. The cowboy entered anyway. The hum ends in silence.